Hello, welcome back to another video. This is day 68 of the plan. And so yesterday there was 2 parts, but today I'll be reading 2 Samuel chapters 2 through 5. So, starting out, chapter 2. David, king of Judah. Sometime later, David inquired of the Lord, "Should I go to the town of Judah?" The Lord answered him, "Go." Then David asked, "Where should I go?" "To Hebron," the Lord replied. So David went there with his 2 wives, Ahinoam and the Jezreelite, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal and Carmelite. In addition, David brought the men who were with him, each one of his family, and they settled in the towns near Hebron. Then the men of Judah came, and there was anointed David king over the house of Judah. They told David it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, "The Lord bless you because you have shown kindness to Saul your Lord when you buried him. Now may the Lord show kindness and faithfulness to you, and I will also show the same goodness to you because you have done this deed. Therefore be strong and valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead. The house of Judah has anointed me king over them." Abner son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Saul's son Ishbosheth and moved him into Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, over all of Israel. Saul's son Ishbosheth was 40 years old and he became king over Israel. He reigned for 2 years. The house of Judah, however, followed David. The length of the time that David was king of Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Abner son of Ner and soldiers of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, marched out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. So Joab son of Zerah and David's soldiers marched out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. The 2 groups took up positions on opposite sides of the pool. And Abner said to Joab, "Let's have the young men get up and compete in front of us." "Let them get up," Joab replied. So they got up and they were counted off. 12 were Benjamin, Ishbosheth's son, and Saul, and 12 from David's soldiers. Then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his sword into his opponent's side so they all died together. In this place, which in Gibeon is named Fields of Blades, the battle that day was extremely fierce, and Abner and the men of Israel were defeated by David's soldiers. The 3 sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Ishai, and Asahel. Asahel was a fast runner, like one of the wild gazelles. He chased Abner and did not turn to the right or left in his pursuit of him. Abner glanced back and said, "Is that you, Asahel?" I don't know how to say that word. "Yes, it is," Asahel replied. Abner said to him, "Turn to your right or left. Seize one of the young soldiers and take whatever you can get from him." But Asahel did not stop chasing him. Once again, Abner warned Asahel, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How could I ever look at your brother Joab in the face?" But Asahel refused to turn away, so Abner hit him in the stomach with the butt of the spear. The spear went through the body, and he fell and died right there. As they all came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died, they stopped, but Joab and Abishai pursued Abner. By sunset, they had gone as far as the hill of Ammah, which is opposite Gibeah, on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. The Benjamites railed to Abner. They formed a unit and then took their stand on top of a hill. Then Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize this will only end in bitterness? How long before you tell the troops to stop pursuing their brothers?" "As God lives," Joab replied, "if you had not spoken, the troops wouldn't have stopped pursuing their brothers until morning." Then Joab blew the ram's horn, and all the troops stopped. They no longer pursued Israel or continued to fight. So Abner and all his men marched to the Arabah all that night. They crossed the Jordan, marched all morning, and arrived at Mahanaim. When Joab had turned back from pursuing Abner, he gathered all the troops. In addition to Asahel, 19 of David's soldiers were missing, but they had killed 360 of the Benjamites and Abner's men. Afterward, they carried Asahel to his father's tomb in Bethlehem and buried him. Then Joab and his men marched all night and reached Hebron at dawn. So that's the end of chapter 1. Or not, that's the end of the first chapter. So 1/4 done. Chapter 3 of Samuel, Civil War. During the long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, David was growing stronger and the house of Saul was becoming weaker. Sons born in David and Hebron. The firstborn was Amnon by Ahinoam the Jezreelite. By the second was Shealib by Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. Third was Absalom son of Michal the daughter of the king, Talmiah of Geshur. Fourth was Adonijah, son of Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, son of Abital. The sixth was Ithream by David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron during the war between the house of Saul and the house of David. And Abner kept acquiring more power in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, and Ishbosheth questioned Abner, "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" Abner was very angry about Ishbosheth's accusation. "Am I a dog's head who belonged to Judah?" He asked. "All this time I've been loyal to the family of your father Saul, to his brothers and to your best friends, haven't betrayed you, David. But now you accuse me of wrongdoing with this woman. May God punish Abner and do so severely, though I don't do for David what the Lord swore to him, to transfer the kingdom of the house of Saul and establish the throne of David over Israel and Judah from Dan to Beersheba." Ishbosheth did not dare respond to Abner because he was afraid of him. Abner sent messengers as his representatives to say to David, "Whose land is it? Make your covenant with me, and you can be certain I'm on your side to turn all Israel over you." David replied, "Good, I'll make a covenant with you. However, there's one thing I require of you first. You will not see my face unless you bring Saul's daughter Michal and you come see me." Then David sent messengers to say to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, "Give me back my wife Michal. I was engaged to her for the price of 100 Philistine foreskins." So Ishbosheth sent to someone to take her away from her husband, Michal, son of Laish. Her husband followed her, weeping, all the way to Bahurim. Abner said to him, "Go back." So he went back. The assassination of Abner. Abner converted the elders of Israel. In the past, he wanted David to be king over you. Now take that action, because the Lord has spoken concerning David. Through my servant David, I'll save my people Israel from the power of the Philistines and the power of all Israel's enemies. Abner also informed the Benjamites and went to Hebron to inform David about all that was agreed on by Israel and the whole house of Benjamin. When Abner and 20 men came to David at Hebron, David held a banquet for him and his men. Abner said to David, "Let me now go, and I'll gather all of Israel to the Lord the king. They'll make a covenant with you, and you will reign over all you desire." So David dismissed Abner, and he went in peace. Just then David's soldiers and Joab returned from a raid and brought a large amount of plunder and goods with them. Abner was not with David in Hebron because David had dismissed him, and he gone in peace. When Joab his whole army arrived, Joab was informed. Abner sent a near came to see the king. The king dismissed him, and he went in peace. Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Look here, Abner came to you. Why did you dismiss him? Now he's getting away. You know what? Abner sent a near came to see you and to find out about your military activities and everything you're doing." Then Joab left for David and sent messengers after Abner. They brought him back from the well at Zerah, but David was unaware of it. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab pulled him to the side to the middle of the city gate as if to speak to him privately, and there Joab stabbed him in the stomach. So Abner died in revenge of the death of Ashiel, Joab's brother. David heard about it later and said, "And I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner son of Ner. May it hang over Joab's head and his father's whole family. May the house of Joab never be without someone who has discharged his Genesis, or a man who can only walk with spindle, or someone who falls to thy sword or stars." Joab and his brother Abishai killed Abner because he had put their brother's shield to death in the battle at Gibeon. David then ordered Joab and all the people who were with him to tear clothes, put on a sackcloth, and mourn over Abner. And King David walked behind the coffin. They buried Abner in Hebron. The king wept loudly along Abner's tomb. All the people wept, and the king sang a lament for Abner. "Should Abner die as fools die, your hands are not bound, your feet not placed in bronze shackles. He fell one who falls victim to criminals." And the people wept over him even more. Then it came to urge David to eat food while it was still day, but David took an oath. "May God punish me and do so severely if I taste bread or anything else before sunset." All the people took note of this, and it pleased them. In fact, everything the king did pleased them. On that day, all the troops and all of Israel were convinced that the king had no part of the killing of Abner son of Ner. Then the king said to soldiers, "You must know that the great leaders fallen in Israel say, 'As for me, even though I am the anointed king, I have little power today. These men, sons of Zerah, are too fierce for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil.'" So, halfway through third chapter, going on to the third chapter now, 2 Samuel chapter 4. The assassination of Ishbosheth. And Saul's son Ishbosheth heard that Abner had died in Hebron. He gave up, and all the Israelites dismayed. Saul's son had two men who were leaders of raiding parties, one named Benah and the other Rechab, sons of Rimmon the Beerothite of the Benjamites. Beeroth is also considered part of Benjamin, and the Beerothites fled to Gideon and still reside there as aliens today. Saul's son Jonathan had a son whose feet were crippled, and he was 5 years old when he reported about Saul Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nanny picked him up and he fled. But as he was trying to flee, he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. Rechab and Benah, the sons of Rimmon and Beerothite, set out and arrived at Ishbosheth's house during the heat of the day while the king was taking his midnight nap. They entered the interior of the house as if to get wheat and stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Benah escaped. They entered the house while Ishbosheth was lying in his bed in his bedroom and stabbed and killed him. They removed his head, took it, and traveled all the way by Arabah all night. They brought it to Ishbosheth's head to David at Hebron and said to the king, "Here the head of Ishbosheth's son Saul, your enemy who intended to take his life. Today the Lord has granted vengeance to my Lord the king against Saul and to his offspring." But David answered his son Rechab and his brother Benah, sons of Rimmon and Beerothite, "As the Lord lives, the one who has redeemed my life from every distress, when the person told me, 'Look, Saul is dead,' he thought it was a fear good news, but I seized him and put him to death at Ziklag. That was my reward for him, for his news. How much more than when a wicked man kills a righteous man in his own house and not his own bed? So now should I not require the blood from you and purge you from the earth?" So David gave orders to the young men, and they killed Rechab and Benah. They cut off their hands and feet and hung their bodies in the pool of Hebron. But they took Ishbosheth's head and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron. Final chapter for today, 2 Samuel chapter 5. David, king of Israel. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "Here we are, your own flesh and blood. Even while Saul was king over us, you were the ones who led us to battle and brought us back. The Lord also said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel. You will be ruler over Israel." So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron. King David made a covenant with them at Hebron in the Lord's presence, and they all anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began his reign. He reigned 40 years, and Hebron reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over Israel and Judah. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem against the Jebusites who inhabited the land. Jebusites said to David, "You will never get in here. Even the blind and the lame can't compel you," thinking, "David can't get in here." Yet David did capture the stronghold of Zion, that is the city of David. He said that day, "Whoever attacks the Jebusites must go through the water and shout to reach to the lame and the blind who are despised by David." For this reason it is said, "The blind and the lame will never enter the house." David took up residence in the stronghold, which he named the city of David. He built up all the way around it, supporting terraces inward. David became more and more powerful, and the Lord God of armies was with him. King Hiram of Tyre sent envoys to David. He also sent cedar logs, carpenters, and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. Then David knew that the Lord had established him a king over Israel and exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. After he arrived from Hebron, David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names of those born to him. These are the names of those born to him in Jerusalem: Shammah, Shabbat, Nathan, Solomon, Ibahar, Elishua, Nepheg, Jephiah, Elishma, Elida, and Eliphet. The Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel. They all went in search of David, but he heard about it and went down to the stronghold. So the Philistines came and spread out the Rephaim valley. Then David inquired of the Lord, "Should I attack these Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" The Lord replied to David, "Attack, for I will certainly hand the Philistines over to you." So David went to Baal-perazim and defeated them there and said, "Like a bursting floor, the Lord has burst out against my enemies before me." Therefore he named that place, "The Lord burst out." The Lord of the Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. The Philistines came up again and spread them out in Rephaim Valley. So David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, "Do not attack directly, but circle around behind them and come at them opposite of the balsam trees. When you hear the sound of marching on the tops of the balsam trees, act decisively, for then the Lord will have gone out ahead of you, striking down your army of the Philistines." So David did exactly as the Lord commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines and all the way from Gibeah to Gezer. So that is all the reading for today. It starts out in 2 Samuel chapter 2, talking about how David, as he started to become king of, he became king of Judah, and all that. I'm trying to scroll through as I just slightly read, and then like all the stuff he did, the troops he pursued, and how the troops were led crossing the Jordan, and how they marched all morning, and where they reached, how they eventually reached Hebron at dawn. I think I'm saying that right. Which, after they get there, it starts they have the Civil War, and eventually Abner is being chased by Asahel, and so he tells him to go to his right or his left, because he was chasing him and he didn't want to kill him, because he didn't want his blood to be on his hands, because he was kind of working with his brother Joab, and so but Asahel would not go to his right or left until eventually Abner stabbed him with the point of his sword or a spear, and so a little while later Joab learned of this, and he went and he stabbed Abner in the stomach and killed him. And then eventually Ishbosheth got assassinated. It was just a lot of killing for the first part. They cut off their hands and feet and hung their bodies and stuff. And then eventually David was completely anointed king over Israel. And people really finally kind of realized he was meant to be king, I guess, and the blood of Abner was not in his hands. He didn't mean for that to happen. And so yeah, that is all for today. So hopefully you had a good day so far. Have a great rest of your day. Remember, God loves you, and goodbye.